I don't wanna grow up, I'm a curious kid. The world has 100 questions I can play with. So I'll open my arms and eyes and wonder every day till the day I die. No one really knows why gravity exists. Naming something doesn't mean that we get it. So I'll live each day.
I mean, even though we stand alone, we stand together.
Ladies and gentlemen, ready for landing. Fasten your seatbelts. Thank you to my Air Force Airlines. Oh, me. Call me the captain. Just blaze!
All right, we got that out of the way. That was like 2 hours of work. Just kidding. So, look, I'm going to break this pre-game show into 3 acts and try to give you some insights on what, how, and why archaeology in the digital age is more relevant than ever to our understanding of the past and for preparing for the events that are shaping our shared future. And we have a lot to cover, so look, I'm going to try and get this done. I'm happy to hang out for questions because I really don't care about either of these teams in this game. And also it's like, hey, you know, spring training is coming around the corner, so let's just do that, okay. But why am I here? Looking around the room here, you know, it's just great to see a whole lot of different generations. And I've been doing this digital archaeology thing for like 25 years, and here's proof. So CD-ROMs, interactive floppy disks, and video, word perfect. 1994, and slides. What are those things? Slides? Oh yeah. Okay, yeah. The Berkeleyan newspaper is no more. It's now an email mailing list. Word perfect, is that still a thing? Huh. CD-ROM, by CD-ROM isn't playable. And floppies, I'm pretty sure Steve Jobs got those killed. I do have the slides, however. They're still perfectly fine. But this was a seminal moment in my life. And working with Ruth Tringham, I consider the pioneer of digital archaeology. We're still doing great adventures together. We went to some very interesting places and worked in some very interesting kinds of environments. But at some point you need to leave the safety nest of Cal, even though they did let me back in. And in the mid-90s, I got to participate in a computer furniture company located just 10 minutes from here at Alameda Point, the Naval Air Station, now known as Alameda Studios, in fact. But I had never lost my passion for archaeology, and Cal did let me back in, shockingly. So my next step was Çatalhöyük in Turkey. Who knows this place? Ever seen it before? Hey, all right, at least one person. Well, this is what's considered to be the home of the birth of agriculture, 10,000 years ago. And I got to spend about 7 years there at this amazing site. So once again, we brought the future of digital archaeology by introducing this lovely thing known as a Palm Pilot, Excel spreadsheets, and low-res digital cameras. So you have to remember where we were. We're at the point where film, we're basically the crossing threshold of film into starting to use digital technology in the early 2000s. It seems like a lifetime ago. Ultimately, we produced this. I brought it here in case you guys want to see it. Okay, so the library may not have a copy of this wonderful tome, which I also use to hold up my computer. I have a couple copies though. But the physical monograph of our excavation work, we really wanted to be able to experience being there in archaeology, being in the past. And in being there as archaeologists and humans, and exploring now and the imagined thens and bringing them to life. So now Çatalhöyük is a World Heritage Site. And the excavation work under Ian Hodder at Stanford has drawn to a close. But the research and the dreams of more immersive ways of engaging with this research continue. So we have theorized as archaeologists and as us as humans, what Neolithic life might have been something like this. And this is a pretty good depiction of what it might have been, but it's two-dimensional. Cutting-edge research brings us ever closer to experiencing their reality through 4D modeling. That would be 3D immersive. And you can have coffee conversations inside of this. But the digital data, the actual bits and models, will fade and die without stewardship. And I'm here to say that it's not just digital stewardship or digital data, though. I would argue that we're really talking about how we are going to work as stewards to preserve our shared human history. Projects of all kinds are beholden to budgets and agendas. And the digital archives at Chatahuyuk are at risk of this. So my dear friend Jason Quinlan, who's been responsible for the photography archive, at this moment the archive is offline. And the Living Archive project is also offline. You can see pilot web under repair, not functional. Now we happen to be having a retreat this week where I'm bringing these two teams together, and we're going to work together along with, this is our site right now, also broken. So Stanford Libraries, the Getty and UCLA, our organization Codifi are coming together to bring new resources to this, but it is a challenge. And there's other challenges. Digital media is a very different kind of medium from paper, film, or stone. It's easy to lose, it's easy to change, it's easy to fake, and it's all around us. In just over 6 months, in 2015, an estimated 14 million news articles that were monitored were lost forever. This represents over twice the total output of the New York Times over the last half century. Websites are a true web of code and content and are in constant flux, and aggressive agents, of course, are working to throw elections. And our friends and our kids, well, us, maybe mostly our friends and kids, right, are drawn in by the allure of social media and our mediated 24-hour news cycle. So we have to be literate. All of us need to be literate and empowered as individuals to know the difference. So when we talk about digital archaeology, interestingly, until a few years ago, the principal concept of digital archaeology was how are we going to save our digital future, because it is also at risk. Now, if we want to ask questions about our modern diet that a site like Chatahuyuk, the birth of agriculture, could help us answer, it has its own serious implications and consequences. Type 2 diabetes and obesity are still our greatest threats to prosperity in the US, right? So we want to assure that the research on agriculture and civilization will last long enough so we can figure out which of these fad diets is actually going to save us, right? So we started the Center for Digital Archaeology in 2011 as a nonprofit dedicated to making human history more engaging through training. We thought that we should start by getting a grip on digital preservation and also looking to push new frontiers in advanced digital archaeology techniques. In other words, we need to put the mask on ourselves so we can get our own oxygen in and make sure that we can figure this out, and then hopefully we can help out everybody else. So far, so good? So that's our backstory. Now I'm going to turn to the what, the how, and the why, and for the rest of my time with you, again, promise to be done before kickoff, I would like to discuss how we use in archaeology the how of how we can use empirical data to understand our past, and how modern tools are effectively revolutionizing the way that we even think about that. In digital innovations, we're going to talk about the knowledge and understanding and interpretations that we use to gather the way that we can then leverage these new innovations in order to produce a longer future for our shared history, as I mentioned earlier, and then how we can leverage the power of these technologies and the knowledge that comes from the generation of using these tools so that all of us can be much more engaged in digital citizenry. And I hope to inspire us all with this. I was going to, my wife's also an archaeologist, since retired, meaning that she's gone on to get a job that has a paycheck. But anyway, we realized that we had something like 30 different projects we could have shared with you. So I understand that there's lots of things you might be interested in, and we're happy to share more, but we're just kind of handpicking some of them. So this is what we're going to try to cover. The beginning part of this, I'm just going to talk a bit about how in archaeology we really think of time and space not as separate ideas, but really as different aspects of a global experience as people. And we have adopted a more holistic approach in archaeology that really looks at taking little, you know what we do, right? We just dig through your trash and try to make big ideas about what that is. That's actually what archaeology does. So there's your spoiler alert. You can go now. I told you everything you need to know. But the thing that's really, I think, to us, the thing that draws us back is our interest in deep time. Really deep time. Past does matter. It matters because our history is an uninterrupted sequence of events intertwined in space and time. It's a flow of stories and memories and facts and people brought together to contribute and compose a complex and beautiful mosaic of our human history. And we are part of this flow, this moment, us here, me talking with you. We're making history at this very moment, and it's up to us to make sure that it's memorable, to make sure that it will count, to make sure that we all have, what we learn today will help us pursue a better tomorrow, right? It is a responsibility for all of us in order to shape our future by learning from our past. So I'm going to break down this crazy big concept down into a couple more kind of chunks of manageability here. Let's begin by taking a look at what the past has learned to teach us here. For instance, until a few decades ago, it seemed that the Dead Sea of Sand of the Afar Desert, where my wife worked, was what, who could imagine that there's anything that we would really learn or that people actually live there? Of course, we now know that it has become the richest scenario for human evolution, taking form out of small pieces of skulls and fragments of bones, these small discoveries that then led to us thinking that evolution was progressive. Linear processes through gradual change in posture and development and language brought ape-like men, as it was thought of, to how we've changed today. Well, we now know through advances and different sciences being drawn together that there's a completely different picture. It's beyond non-linear, and it's changing literally every year. Innovative dating techniques, DNA studies, sophisticated analyses we can use that are showing that human evolution is really far from being a linear process. Different species of hominids populated Earth and developed specialized skills and adapted to their different environments. This is something that has never been more important to us as humans than now, for all the reasons that we know. We live in California, so we know all about adaptability. Well, some went extinct, others were more successful. Some had the right tools in the right moment, others were in the wrong place at the wrong time. Some were more adaptable than others, and adaptability and learning from the environment and experiences from that knowledge is the key to success and sustainability. So here's another example, a little bit closer. In Egypt, the Pyramid of Cheops, for a long time, adventurers and archaeologists were focused on its geometry and its majesty, right? How in heaven could people manage to build such a monument with the simple means available 4,000 years ago? Well, they understood how by moving giant sleds over the desert and dampening the sand in front of the sleds to reduce friction, Stonehenge style, that's how I could think of it. Building temporary ramps over the pyramids to work on it. But more recently, we have focused on different and somehow much more interesting aspects of this story. Who were the people that built the pyramids? What was their society? What were their lives like? So how many of us familiar with the narrative are thinking about the building of the pyramid as thousands of slaves working for the tantrums of one man? It's just all these political jokes that I decided not to say. I'm just going to have to bite my tongue. Did it anyway. All right, there we go. Very poor conditions until death or replacement. Such as well, this is pretty much the traditional picture. Well, years of research are telling us a quite different story. Again, thank you, my beautiful wife, for giving me this great research. So at some point, we started looking around as archaeologists from the big monument, looking around saying, wait, what's all this stuff here? What are all these traces? It turns out the village of Giza, just next door, has an entire society of workers, men, women, children, gathering places, breweries, and bakeries. Very decent tombs for all, the right formula for the gods looking to make their fair journey into the afterlife. Well, there's an entire society of people that were along for the ride. They're chosen to be part of something unprecedented. People came likely from all parts of Egypt, not just as captives, but willing, eager, and really wanted to be part of this great testimonial of the Egyptian culture. The narrative is as important as the geometry of the pyramid, in other words. Archaeologists are finding better and better ways to capture this complexity of the ancient worlds and understand the information ancient people left for us in order for us to learn about them. So you see, as humans, since the dawn of time, we've cared very much for producing information about ourselves. Any human society at any time in history has produced lessons for us to learn in the form of art, language, architecture, and traditions. Today, that tiny sliver of time, the revolution time of now, this digital age, we have these unprecedented possibilities to document in scientific ways and efficiently understand the traces of our past, but it is a relatively new game. And our purpose as archaeologists is to get insights into the physical remains of these activities and make sure that we conduct our research as much as possible in a way that we can help all of us understand the past and enjoy it. Archaeology, though, is a destructive process. We basically start by removing the layers and uncovering finds which we cannot put back together. You have to destroy things in order to figure them out. This is why it's so important to have a good record of what we find. But it is also important to record digitally monuments that can be at risk from destruction from natural forces, like the Mayan sites where vegetation grows wildly and covers them in an even short period of time, or due to destructive acts like the Buddhas of Bamiyan, the ancient monumental statues, a standing Buddha in central Afghanistan destroyed by the Taliban in 2001. Well, so there's some of the what, okay? And now I get to move a bit more into firmer ground where I feel a bit more comfortable in the digital archaeology stuff and talk a bit more about the how. So in archaeology and related disciplines, we're caught between the risks of digital ephemera, as I mentioned earlier, and our call to preserve our past by any means necessary and possible. So I'm going to talk briefly now about digital tools that are helping us to truly enhance our understanding. These are things that we've all actually experienced. All of us are doing that. Whether it's a show on Nova or Time Team we heard about earlier, but there are things that are happening in digital technologies that are moving us well beyond our understanding. There are amazing advantages to these new tools and capabilities, and it's moving at such a curve that the little ones here in the second row are going to have just amazing futures. That's for my 7-year-old son. There's also really practical things we need to do. Remember, we're still just digging dirt, people. So, and mostly, from my perspective, the digital stewardship capability that we hope that all of us can kind of embrace. So it kind of starts like this.
Within the last few minutes, we've learned from opposition activists in Palmyra that the entire city has now fallen. IS militants have damaged, destroyed, and plundered ancient sites in territory they've seized.
Islamic State militants have blown up the historic Arch of Triumph in Palmyra, which was considered one of the jewels in the collection of ruins at the Roman-era site.
The Institute for Digital Archaeology, I don't really call them the other Institute for Digital Archaeology, but they're doing amazing work. They felt the same call. They're in the UK, and they were struck in horror, as we all were when we saw this. What can we do? What can we do when the Baghdad Museum was sacked? What can we do, right? I want she has come everywhere, because it's like the best responses to this. It's visceral, it's emotional. So, what would it be like to reconstruct the triumphal arch that was physically destroyed of Palmyra? The idea to do that requires digital technologies that can take tens of thousands or even millions of images and put them back together. So images taken from a variety of different angles, from historic books, and put those all together through an algorithm that can actually come out of the other end with a very scientifically reliable model, then use 3D printing techniques in order to actually create a true-to-life replica in stone. So this isn't 3D printing on plastic, this is actually in stone. The results was this arc, the Triumphal Arch, has been put on a world tour. It's been to London, Washington, Florence, Dubai, New York, among other places.
We're looking at how to apply architectural 3D printing and 3D machining to produce sort of pieces of recreated archaeology.
Kind of amazing, right?
Ladies and gentlemen, the Triumphal Arch of Palmyra. 3, 2, 1.
We see ourselves as people with potentially an enabling technology and a willingness to help. I personally feel very strongly that we should not allow hostile groups of any kind to define the apparent cultural background of a nation, of a country, of any kind of site.
So it's been an interesting thing to generate this. There's a lot of wonderful backstory, and if we had 7 hours, we could do that. Again, I can point you to these resources. But so the purpose of building this was to effectively to demonstrate, in this case, to terrorists that we're not going to go slowly into the night, that we are going to figure out a way to respond as humans. There was an idea that Palmyra in Syria would be available to tourism in 2019. Anybody read the papers recently? So kind of know that that's not a thing, right? This was yesterday. So we're still, this is not anything that stops. There's no idea that we're done and we're going to be able to return the world to a previous order. We're still dealing with incredible risks and challenges worldwide. All right, so digital documentation that we do. Some of you may recognize this jacket. That's Presidio of San Francisco. And there are a lot of different techniques. I'm going to only talk about 2, but I realize I'm actually doing shockingly well on time, and we have time afterwards to talk about any of the ones you might want to. And I have 85 more slides we can look at and some actual examples. But these are some of the key ones that are actually, various versions of these are our daily bread now. These are the things that we kind of count on in a modern archaeological landscape of work. So, along with paperless recording methodologies, the thing that I focus almost all my energy on, these 2 particular imaging techniques are extremely important. These are the 2 techniques used that made it possible to generate what you just saw, the Palmyra Triumphal Arch. These are exemplars of techniques that were almost impossible to do a decade ago. In 2011, when I was working on the Presidio, imaging one small part of the original adobe walls are now covered. If you go to the Officers Club now, you should all do that if you haven't done that. You can go and you can see a little peek into the Mesa room. You can like poke and you can see some of the original. Well, for one summer, those were actually uncovered, the oldest building in the city. 1776. Took us 4 days to process one panel in terms of just the imaging processing time. Now that's about 30 minutes. So truly, these are techniques that are actually impactful for the way that we work. There are also things that we say that can't be done just by us, but can be done by all of you. They do not require special technology. You can do it with your phone. And just some training and some cheap gear, and you're good to go. This is kind of an overall workflow, like we say, a day in the life of a modern archaeological project. This happens to be the 6th Roman Legion in Israel. What? Yeah, the Romans went to Israel and they hung out for about 400 years and kind of just watched people. That's what they did in the 6th Legion. They demonstrably proved that at Legio, at this particular site, that happened here. And I had the benefit to go there in 2015, and we effectively came out with this kind of methodology. It covers all the stuff. So real quick, it covers things like we have to record, of course, we're recording the archaeology, we're gathering all the notes, thousands and thousands of artifacts coming out of the ground, photography along with that, geospatial data. We want it to be accurate to millimeters. So it's intense, and it's a field school, so you're dealing with lots of people that are very new to this kind of capability. So with the training and combination with this low-tech and high-tech gear, physical scales along with some pretty high-tech gear, it is possible to generate astounding results that are actually useful. This is Adam Prins, and together with this guy Matt and myself, we came up with a technique that allowed us to regress 4 by 4 meters of space. We could photograph and image a 4 by 4 meter excavation area and generate a model that was accurate to 8 millimeters in 37 minutes. That was the fastest we ever did. 37 minutes in the field, but a generator on a very powerful little laptop. So it's insane. And that was 2015. This is a geographical model, so this is what you can see. All of us can see that this is correlated to that, it's correlated to that. You can start to see the actual directionality of the underground, in this case, the plumbing of the site. So it has useful three-dimensional data is actually can be very useful in a two-dimensional space. Just to bring it on home for us, again, this is an early model of the American period of the roof at the Presidio of the Officers Club, that roof in the front. To do that, they put me on this crazy cherry picker thing, driving down the street. I took about, to the math here, 40 photos, and they were able to see every single historic period square nail. They then removed every single square nail on every single board, did the repairs, and put them all back. That took me 15 minutes to photograph. So this is, that's the thing that's revolutionary about this. I'm just saying, sometimes digital does win over paper. This would be one of those cases. All right, this is an oldie but a goodie. This is a project, the largest Egyptian collection outside of Egypt happens to be at the Phoebe Hearst Museum in Berkeley. And this is a Reisner collection. I have to give a great big shout out to Culture Heritage Imaging. They're a local San Francisco nonprofit. They really are the world leader in one of the two techniques I mentioned, this thing called reflectance transformation imaging. So by the way, my bad, what you just saw was a photogrammetry, the linking of images together to produce a 3D model. This is going to talk about a whole different level of imaging that reveals things on the surface that, again, we can't see. It's back to what I mentioned earlier, things we can't see with our naked eye. So one of the great challenges, and maybe boring, hence my screenshot earlier of metadata, is putting the images together. In this case, the actual collections are disparate. There, some of them in the Boston Museum, some are in Egypt. This collection is all over the world. So the idea of this database was to try to bring all of that together along with this amazing digital imaging. So that was the idea of this project. It was a proof of concept. We spent about 3 weeks doing it. And this is still our unattainable dream. This is what we all wish we could have in archaeology. So the idea was to bring the whole collection to make it searchable and indexable, and then be able to tie it to this absolutely amazing technique called reflectance transformation imaging. How this works is you fix the camera in space, you put the object in front of it, you move the light, the flash in this case, and what you get as a result is something that's amazing. An ability to relight in real time. These tools are free and open source, and you can download them from the web, and change it to what's called a specular enhancement, where you can reveal the true surface beneath it. And it's a scientific computational model. It's absolutely astounding. So from the astounding to the rest of us, back to paper. Back to the reason that I get up every morning, believe it or not. So it turns out that there are some other impacts of paper. And one of those impacts is that over 95%, we did a survey around the world over the last 6 years. We call it paper-centric. It doesn't mean that you're not doing all the digital stuff, but the thing that we're going to do in the middle is always going to be paper. Why is that bad? We'll get to why it's bad later. But it turned out we also learned along the way that it's also it's the third largest polluter in the US and Canada. Every single paper cup you get from Starbucks, not recyclable. 50% of waste in business is paper. Deforestation continues at a time where climate change is our new way of life here, for example, in California, and the expectation of paper demand is expected to double by 2030. So we love good paper. I'm here in a library, brought a book, like books. I got my first edition print of all my favorite John Steinbeck books. That's good paper. The way that we do archaeology, this stuff, bad paper. I write like a pharmacist. I'm left-handed. I've never really learned how to write. So this is my dear friend and now Vice President Chris Sims, and that's him working left-handed, drawing scrawl in Belize. Okay? In order for us to let go of paper, to make that true, we would need to make some new technology that could work anywhere without any form of internet connectivity. That could be completely secure because some archaeology takes place on military bases or is protecting the digital sovereignty of tribes. If you're going on or working at gas production facilities for PG&E, etc. It's got to be faster than paper. And you can't ever lose data. So paper, again, resiliency, this stuff tends to be ephemeral. So we began a brand new company around this. And it's a benefit corporation, a B Corp like Ben & Jerry's in Patagonia and Equator Coffee, that has a social benefit mission to figure out how to figure this out. It's more than paper, it's more than digital, it's somewhere in between. That's what we're doing, and we've been doing this for a couple of years. We've had the opportunity to work with projects around the world to try to figure this stuff out. It's been an amazing process and incredibly humbling. Similar to my PhD at Berkeley, which I call it the duh hypothesis. I studied vision. I figured, you know, if you make it easier for people to see, they'll find more stuff. Duh, it turned out to be true. The 38-page dissertation, it wasn't very long. True story, whole other story. It turns out this is really, really hard to do. It's incredibly difficult to do. Agencies still require paper in most of the states in the US. So there's a lot of complexity, but what I want, instead of talking about the things that are hard, I just thought I might show some of the successes of literally just the last year. Just a spattering of projects, and why again they're important. So this is St. Croix in the US Virgin Islands. Bill White, who's now at Cal, went there last January, 75 days after Hurricane Maria. This is what St. Croix looks like. And he also did underwater archaeology. Really hard to do underwater archaeology with paper. So this is an amazing project. This article came out on January 23rd, 2019. They're calling the Kingdom of Haiti the Wakanda of the Western Hemisphere. Happy to get you the reference to that article. Cameron Monroe at UC Santa Cruz is doing world quality work there. They had to be evacuated because there was civil unrest and strikes in Sans Souci this summer. So again, hostile environments, having lots and lots of copies of your data as opposed to one physical book, it's a good thing. And now, for the first time, I actually get to publicly show you the project that has been taking up almost all of my energy, second only to my 7-year-old son. This is, the HS2 is a high-speed rail project in the UK. It is the largest excavation probably undertaken ever in the world. It is to build a high-speed rail. It goes from London to Birmingham, and ultimately it's a $180 billion project that will go all over the UK. That, right there, is the application we built. First time I heard about, got to see this picture of this happening was the front page of the Guardian. That would be the UK Guardian. Because archaeology in construction projects is a competitive process. When you threshold into the commercial archaeology, is 80% of what we do. We'd like to have buildings, we'd like to have houses. Archaeology is that thing you need to do. So it's just taken a long time for this to come to the surface. And now that it's out, some really exciting things to share with you.
Dealing with around 40,000 individuals, but that's still one of the largest post-medieval burial excavations ever to take place.
You're excavating 40,000 plots?
Yes.
Okay, so as I like to say, I went to school in California, so math is not my strength, but 40,000 is a lot of burials. It is one cemetery at the, how many of you have been to London? Lots of us, great. Euston Station is where you go to catch the trains to take the Eurostar to HS1, the shuttle that goes to France. But that's just a part of the story, okay? So we're looking at the largest archaeological project ever undertaken on the planet. That's what this is. So we only have a small part so far. We have St. James Gardens in London, and we're now doing the Park Street Cemetery in Birmingham. In 2019, there will be over 1,000 archaeologists excavating. The idea of this being done on paper is impossible, actually. Just 1%, one part of the project that was undertaken in 2017, they generated 300,000 context records. That's 600,000 pieces of paper. Just do the math. So we're talking about filling rooms and rooms and rooms with paper, where less than 7% of the data collected from that was ever digitized. This is our result. This was my Christmas present. Jürgen is the data supervisor from Headland Archaeology. And when they did a full audit of all the data, and after 2,800 contexts recorded, 2,800 of those burial contexts, 0 of them had any data loss. That kind of flipped me out. So that was a good day. It's not always that way, but that was a good day. This is what they want to build. The future of high-speed travel. It's not just about making trains faster. It's a very, anybody ever have a train station put in your backyard? A lot of people are not happy about this project. But it's also about farm to table. It's about the ability of having fresh produce and other things travel from Birmingham to London and back in less than 38 minutes. So there's a lot of things about this that are really cool. This is what it looks like right now. So we're dealing with with basically a construction style project with lots of people wearing this high-vis gear, and that's someone using Codifi over there in the corner. There. So this has been an incredible project of great meaning to us. It's kind of amazing. Way closer to home. The Karuk tribe, one of the largest tribes here in California, along with UC Berkeley, it's funded by USDA, funded $1.2 million grant on climate variability, we call it, to make sure that we keep our funding. Climate variability, adaptability, really looking at the impacts of climate change and variability in the middle of a fire zone. So you were dealing with this is in the 6 Rivers area of the Klamath, and the Karuk tribe are effectively the world's leaders in handling fire. In U.S. forest lands, it has been illegal to burn what's called a prescribed burn or a cultural-based burn for over 108 years. That's finally changing. So no, we don't need more rakes in the forest. What we need is to burn the forest to make the forest not burn. Right? We all get this. Get this. That is an incredible project. It has great import for all of us who are living here in California. All right, we got through a lot of stuff. Fire hose of digital archaeology, maybe. These are examples of projects that we do. When we work with folks, we come in deep contact with different people and traditions and cultures and the uses of our culture. But there is something common to all of these projects for us, the passion of our cultures, of our world heritage, the understanding that there is richness and diversity, that we all have something to learn from each other, and that digital tools aren't just tools that assist us in doing our job better. But we believe there's something more. This is in the movies, this is that plot point when you thought it was the butler that did it. It turns out sometimes paper does do it. In the sense that in September of 2018, a fire broke out in Rio de Janeiro in Brazil, which housed the 200-year-old National Museum of Brazil. This is the emotional part for me. Okay, so museum held more than 20 million items. 90% of them were lost. Brazil President Michel Temer deemed the fire as an incalculable loss for the country's historical and cultural heritage. The cause of the fire is still unknown. Spokesperson for the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro that supervises the museum told ABC News that the museum was receiving only 60% of its budget for that year. But the last president who had visited the National Museum was, I'll do my best, Juscelino Kubitschek in 1961. You don't visit, you don't care. Not much of our history has been physically preserved, said the spokesperson. It was like setting Versailles on fire. Thousands, years of history that can never be recovered. So I'm going to stop on books, go full circle. When We Are No More, How Digital Memory is Shaping Our Future is the title of this beautiful book, written by Abby Smith Rumsey, who's an expert on digital data collection and curation. She's been a consultant to the Library of Congress, among many things. She's a personal hero of mine. So she says that the fundamental purpose of recording our memories as people is to ensure that they live beyond our brief decades on this planet, right? And it will be lost in terms of digital, it will be lost in ephemeral digital landscape if we do not become our own data managers. The skills to control our personal information over the course of our lives are essential to digital literacy and scholarship, dare I say citizenry at this point. These are statements that are very important, and they have actually deep anthropological roots. So let's pull it together and make it all about the Bay Area again for us here. So it turns out, Alfred E. Kroeber and Theodora got busy and created one of my personal favorite authors, Ursula K. Le Guin, Kroeber Le Guin, it turns out. Science fiction writer. And she has one of my favorite quotes of all time, and that is, "The truth is a matter of the imagination, and the soundest facts may fail or prevail in the style of its telling." So let's just think about all the examples we gave, from Facebook, fake news and all that, to the fact that it's so easy to change things, how we're going to defend all that, to digital versus book and all that. Like the singular organic jewel of our seas, which grows brighter as one woman wears it, but worn by another dulls and goes to dust. Facts are no more solid, coherent, round, and real than pearls are, yet none of them are false, and it is all one story. So, thank you. Yes, sir. Do we have lights? Should we do lights?
I'll get lights.
Okay.
Yeah, on the high-speed rail project in Britain, is that all a tunnel from London to Birmingham, or does it someplace go above ground?
It's mostly above ground.
It's mostly above ground, once they get out of the London Metro?
Yeah.
So are the archaeologists also at work on that section, or just on the underground sections? They're everywhere.
Everywhere. So so if you think about it, in order to do anything, there has to be, they call them trial trenches, where you're going to go through and scrape a bit of ground and take a look at, use this thing. So scrape a bit of ground and take a sense of it. I will point out that, to me, what's so amazing about this project isn't just the archaeology, it's the palimpsest of what's going on. There's biologists and historians and I mean, it's a complete multi-dimensional research, really a research project. It's incredible. Yes, ma'am?
It's just amazing to me that they would recognize and acknowledge the importance of capturing all this, for history, to preserve it for future generations. Because, I mean, I can just see it's like, hell of it, let's just build. You know, I'm just thinking, that's the business idea. But somehow in England, they seem to be very enlightened.
Well, I mean, as was pointed out earlier, they have a couple more zeros after us in terms of, earlier times. Although, I always remind us that we're all the folks that got here. We're all the immigrants, right? So we're now looking at that. Now the data threshold for North America is about 100,000 years ago. So 1776. So we're dealing with deep time where we're looking at Native Americans here. But you're right. Also, it's the law. So it turns out it is the law. If you want to do a project in the UK, you're required by law to do an archaeological assessment and to plan the budget to actually preserve those records.
But that somebody had the intelligence to make that law.
Yeah.
Well, they grew up with Roman forts and things in their towns, so they had a tactile.
They did.
We're out here in the West, where 150 years is really old. There's no Roman walls.
Yeah, and there was no history before that.
That's right.
So the Palmyra destruction was, just terrible. And I know that the more data you can get digitally, the more you can reconstruct. So I was thinking, the military, our own and perhaps the French who were with us there, Syria, I'm sure had a lot of digital data, perhaps classified, both overhead and on ground. Is there a liaison that you all think would be worthwhile to maybe get some of that as you do your reconstructions and gather more of the data that is ongoing now on the ground in Syria?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, in the sense, so I'll pause here and kind of gather because it's some important points. So first of all, archaeology is one of these weird fields. I always put it. You know, we're really late to the party. We kind of borrow technology from everybody, but most of the satellite imagery we're getting is typically declassified, corona satellite imagery, et cetera, from war wars. So you're absolutely right. So the project that made that possible, that is continuing to improve the 3D model of not just the arch, but the entire of our site, is this 1 million image database where this guy, what they're doing is world-class research on bringing together all sorts of imagery. I was fortunate enough in a very tiny way to work on a project in Jordan, Jordan-Syrian border. These are these Qatars, these castles, and same drill, these film images. If you take 2 or 3 images and put them together, you have amazing 3D data. So they're working on that. I figure, well, it's all blown up now, so you may as well just share it. So it typically takes a bit longer than that, but you're absolutely right. Yes, ma'am.
Couple of things. A while back, I thought it was really unfair for England to withhold artifacts that belong to other nations, but in light of what's happened in the Middle East, I have to revisit that. And then what's good about preserving the history is a lot of times we go back and revisit and correct history that we thought was mindset one way and we find out it was another. And then I don't understand how in South America, the museums, the people were so isolated from the other academia that could have supported them and ended up losing so much precious history like that.
Well, see, that what's tough about that story. My emotional response there I wasn't trying. You know, I'm not an actor. Okay, I'm just a guy. Because the other half of that story really has to do also with our own California story, with all the wildfires here. I figured Super Bowl Sunday, so I'm just not going to go there today. But I was invited to a session in Greece, specifically to look at museum preservation. So if we don't physically, so one of the big tensions in doing digital stuff, this notion that if we do this digital stuff, then no one will go to museums, right? So, well, it turns out no digital stuff. President didn't go since 1961. If we keep the stuff basically in mothballs and don't figure out a way to make it relevant, then you don't go, right? If you do a really cool exhibition at, say, the Hearst Museum, which they're doing now, then everybody shows up. Look at what we're happening with the SF moment. We have to keep this stuff relevant. But you're also looking at, I mean, we could pick a material type. Film, basically, film will decay and erode and become basically a bomb. So trying to figure out how to keep film preserved is a challenge. So all of these things are going on. But I had a revelation. Every time you do one of these things, you kind of come up with a new thing, hopefully. And mine was like, wait a minute. So this lots of copies keeps data safe is really true. And we can make it really relevant to ourselves if we think about the fact that in California, due to insurance laws, if you don't have a complete record of everything that's in your house, then you get 40%. If you have a complete photographic record of your whole house, you get 100%. So, you know, this is the point. This is it to us now. What we're trying to do is figure out, again, half my life, 25 years later, 51 years old. We're looking at still trying to figure out how to make this stuff really true and work. To your other point, though, I think it's an incredibly important one. Yes, you know, Alga marbles in, you know, British Museum. Lots of people complain about that. We get that, but there are some really amazing things that have happened. I spent the last 6 years prior to going back to archaeology on indigenous building digital indigenous tools and platforms. So this notion of digital repatriation, of the ability to say through partnership, let's keep the object where it's safe for now in a, you know, conditioned location with you know, all those affordances, but there isn't a reason why the digital knowledge couldn't go back to, say, a tribe. Okay?
That makes sense.
If I had said those words 6 years ago, I would be slapped.
Yeah.
But it's changing fast, and it's changing well because museums, including our lovely Hearst here, are doing it finally.
Makes sense.
Yeah, but also what some of the stuff that the Muslims destroyed, the British Museum has, and so they're making, I've heard they're making copies of what's in the British Museum, some of the things there, and they're going to eventually put them back where they once were, that are now destroyed. Have you heard about that one?
Yeah, that was the backstory that you saw, and so you know, this is the interesting thing. You know, I'm still kind of personally like not entirely. I'm like on the fence about reproductions, but if we think about them more as, if we remember this kind of point, buildings aren't fixed. You know, this rendition that we have at Çatalhöyük is like, well, it doesn't really look like that. I mean, like half the houses are falling down, they're mud brick. So there isn't any fixed idea, so I'm really okay with that. And if they help us to learn, that's also fantastic. But when they're systematically destroyed to the point of erasing them, repopulating Palmyra would be kind of amazing, wouldn't it? It would be more than a political statement. It would be a human statement. Sir?
Have they actually put one of those Buddhas that was blown up in Afghanistan back? I thought I heard that some Italian group had worked on that and had actually reinstalled it. Is that correct? Or?
I was trying to actually look for that research because I thought I had the same thing, but then I thought maybe it was just a really happy dream and I but they did it. They definitely did a light show version of it. They did a projection of it for sure. Sir, I see all yours.
Are you worried though about the corruptibility of the digital process? By that I'm talking about the recent stories where we know now that the digital revolution, that there can be actual things that are shown, that are made, that are totally false, and yet on the other hand, look exactly real. And, you know, I guess it gets back to the authenticity and integrity of the individual producing it. It seems to me that is a threat to the digital concepts that you're talking about.
Yeah, I want to just bite all my tongues off right now because yes, I mean, so this is always the thing that we worried about was it's fake. It's easy to fake data. Turns out if you do it right, it's really hard it's really hard to build bad or data if you follow kind of basic forensic principles. So what we're doing at Codifi as an example is we're building a chain of custody where the data is basically validated and checked on every possible way. So if we all together had an experience right now and use our eyes and our ears and our thoughts and our minds and said, wow, this really did happen, and then somebody comes up on the microphone, this happens every day right now, I'm not going to name any names, and says, that's totally not true, that's completely fake. So, somehow that is still trumping all the knowledge that we have. So I mean, this is happening literally daily. But I now worry less about this because there's so many ways to interrogate the data. And we can also go to one of the greatest reflexive transformation imaging results I saw was trying to look at like the forging of papers over time. Yeah. So, oh wait, this ink, clearly it is prototype, but clearly that person totally didn't sign that because they can go through and look at the imprints of the original signature. So forgeries is as old as us, for sure. Right.
I'd like to just offer, I've done a project with Michael, so I just wanted to offer like a 3-minute version of what I've done with him and how it helped my organization. I manage art collections, and a lot of the stuff I manage is outside. A lot of the stuff I manage is calcium-based stone, like limestone and marble, with hard water, so it eats the calcium. So we did a project, a photogrammetry project. I met Michael at the Hearst Museum of Anthropology, and I wanted to try to give him like a really hard test. So I have all this white or light stone, light gray stone that's outside, mixed shadow and light, variable lighting outdoors in rural California. And Michael and his team came up and they took 2 days to photograph everything. And he said that we're going to be accurate down to about 1 millimeter. And so I was able to take the resultant photogrammetry data and show, I work for a big company, and I wanted to spend a bunch of money on restoring these pieces. So I was able to show irreparable damage that had happened to people in New York of a piece that can't be moved that's in Northern California. It take about 5 hours to get there from here. And it was compelling enough that they just said, fix it all over the next however many years. And so one of the things I think is really cool about this is that we have a model. So it took 2 days. They built a model that theoretically we could take and we could build into a CAD model, and we could potentially reproduce this fountain if we wanted to, like any of these things. But it was also able to show, you could write an email to somebody and say, this piece of art, there's only one of them, and it's irreparably damaged, there's cracking throughout, or you can show them a picture, and it's a 3D object in a PDF, Adobe PDF file, and they can click on it, and they can zoom in, and then the words don't matter at that point because they can see it. And a lot of the concepts that Michael touched on in this excellent presentation, when you see them happen in person, or there's cognitive pathways that are opened up by a picture and in a three-dimensional object. When you can do it digitally and you can show it to somebody, it comes in an email, and they can open it up and look at it, play with it. It opens up neural pathways that you can't open up with just words. So, thanks for coming on this.
Thank you. One correction so that Tom doesn't yell at me. It's accurate to 1/10 of a millimeter. Oh, sorry. That was my work. That was just the goal. To get to conservation grade, when you're looking at chisel marks, you got to get to microns, and we were fortunate enough. I mean, I just got into the lighting, but we did bring out one of the world's leaders in this technology to kind of do the hard work, to do the math. He's from Colorado to do that stuff. Sir?
If people haven't seen it, I highly recommend Peter Jackson's new documentary on the First World War.
Yeah.
Talking about using digitized camera work, etc. It's a miracle. It brings to life these soldiers. It's awesome.
Yeah. Is that in theaters or where?
Yeah, it just started this week. You can see it in 3D as well. Yeah. I think it's called They Will Not Grow.
Did you say that, I still can't pronounce the word, Catalhoyuk?
Could all try it. Çatalhöyük.
Çatalhöyük.
Very good.
Çatalhöyük was the first well-established agricultural community that we know of?
Well, I mean, back in the day, so James Millard, who excavated in the 60s, published his seminal piece in the year I was born, so 67, and is considered, quote, the world's first city. That's not true. And these are the classic statements that kind of make us cringe. But without a doubt, I mean, looking at sedentism, the rise of agriculture, domestication of grains and all this throughout the Levant, throughout again, Yugoslavia, Bulgaria, and Turkey, you're looking at obviously called the cradle civilization, all that stuff. It's all true. I mean, Sumerian beer, it's a thing. So. Anyway, did you have a follow-up to that, or was that the question?
No, I just want to know about what is our knowledge regarding the earliest occupation of that site?
So about 10,000 years before now.
And that had to do with domestication of plants, of certain wheat varieties?
Yeah. It is interesting now as I think about it, like I said, I mean, like we're looking at, there is a fantastic article that effectively looked at how sedentism and the birth of agriculture has been pretty much a bad thing for us as people, which is totally true. So it is an interest. That's what I'm saying. We got to make sure that the research persists so we can actually cure all the things. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just ready to question that. I mean, I was taught in high school about the Golden Crescent, Tigris, Euphrates, all that stuff.
Thank you.
And yet, then we find out, but there was stuff going on in Africa, and because we're so Western centric, we're going to ignore that. And I'm thinking, there was stuff going on in South America, Mexico, wheat, corn.
You're 100% correct. I mean, I mean, if I get what you're saying, which is like, we pick our rock star locations based on lots of stuff, right? Which is, what were the research agendas? Who's funding it? Where do people want to work? Where do we think all the things happen? You know, we think, of course, we think of Greece as being the beginning of quote society and all these things, right? So we all know, okay, so we began in Africa, got that done. A whole lot of stuff happened here too. We call this the New World, but again, is 100,000 new enough for us all? So that's the thing. You know, this is what's brought me back to archaeology over and over again. It's just like that deep time that's happening, and you know, it's amazing that, and from as a young guy here, in the last 25 years, like I've seen archaeology revolutionize the way we think about being human, and that's continuing to happen. So, one thing you should never do though, if you are a doctor of archaeology, is don't ever put that on your airplane ticket. And in the middle of the night, they come up and say, "Dr. Ashley, can you help?" I'm like, "Is the patient dead?" For like 10,000 years, I got you. Other than that, not so much.
How is that knowledge helping us be better humans today?
Which part?
10,000 years ago, they developed a community and a new way of living.
The easy examples go back. Remember this earlier slide of looking at hominids and who survived and all that. So paleontology. So easy ones. Okay, so the Maya showed up because of aliens. That's one thing that came. We figured out that wasn't true. But why did they go extinct? Did they go extinct? What happened? What were the events what are the events that caused societies to rise and fall? So the big stories, real quick, big stories are the big stories. They're the ones we see on Nova. Well, this happened, and then this meteorite came, whatever. No, it's the little tiny stories, the little teeny tiny things that happen over hundreds and thousands of years that are. I mean, that's why this climate variability stuff that's happening now is the silent killer, because it will happen so slowly that we can't get it into a news cycle because it's going to happen at such a speed. But it's happening at a speed that is just absolutely perceptible to us, right?
To add to what this lady said, a lot of, probably 99.99% Americans don't know that the Bill of Rights is based on Native American governmental mindset. And I can't for your cause and this other group in New York, upstate New York with the Welcome Belt. And so again, America has always known that, they just don't tell you that in history books in the schools here. But again, correcting, like we said with this, is it is wonderful to learn about our ancestors and then put things correctly in perspective. Because the expression is, whoever wins the war writes the history and we're original, and that's not going anymore. It's not happening, especially when you have archaeologists that are being truthful.
Yeah, I mean, so I brought this. The thing I brought up the diet is actually because I'm kind of obsessed with these things. But the, you know, the paleo diet, the caveman diet. We all hear about these guys, paleo diet. So the thing that is probably true, that the prevailing science is saying that mobility, the number one thing you can do to stay alive is be mobile, keep using your mind and all those things. Eat less, mostly plants, but that we are, you know, our dentition demonstrates that we probably, you know, that we've been meat eaters since forever as humans. So, you know, these are the things that come out. We can use the science of archaeology to actually say, well, okay, that actually was true, or that's completely crazy. Versus, like I said, you know, the next Jillian Michaels that comes out and says, you've got to do this other crazy diet. You know what to say. Or whatever you do, make sure you eat all the hot wings out there.
Get a vaccination.
Right, vaccinations. Great one. Yes, ma'am.
Back to the Buddhist statues, is there one or two of them?
There are two.
And they destroyed both of them.
They did.
But now the Italians are going to replace them, you said?
So this is a part where I'm careful because we're also recording this to say I don't know, and I think that's true. And in my sleep cycle, I remember them doing it.
And they're two male Buddhas side by side?
Yeah, so I can go back to that slide and kind of remind us the current state of affairs. This is just one of them.
So these aren't the side views, this is two images of the same.
This is the same image before and after. But there's at least two. I should know that, but I don't.
Why would they do duplicates next to each other?
No, this is just demonstrating. This is before and after all the explosives.
Yeah, I thought you said there were two.
There are two.
But they're not next to each other.
They're not the same.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they both were just.
But they were blown up.
Yeah.
You know what's amazing? You know what they had to do to do this? They fired tanks at these.
Yeah.
They fired rockets at them.
Yeah.
And nothing happened. This stone is so strong.
Wow.
That they just physically finally put dynamite at the bottom of it, and that's what blew it up. It's incredible. They really wanted to get it done. And the Buddhists were like, we really don't want to go.
And how close were they to each other?
Which?
What the two Buddhas? What distance?
Again, I don't know. Yeah,
I think they were close.
I can look it up. But
It's been a long time.
Yes, ma'am. One question.
Those 40,000 grave sites in England, what's the date range of those?
Yeah.
You know, that's a great question. There'll be a final question apparently. This is great. So and that's the strictest for y'all. So what's really fascinating is I got to visit it before they started excavating it. So this is a place that was a dog park that you go with your kids, and your grandparents were probably buried there. So it's a modern cemetery. And because of that, what makes it fascinating to me is that it makes it very personal. So now volunteers, so if we did this project here, there's a big cemetery here that had to be excavated. We basically either agreed or disagreed, but the point is that it's got to happen, is they're going out and doing grave marker recording and learning the same techniques as volunteers, and it's becoming a true community project, which is kind of amazing. One of the reasons that to put all the gear on is when you excavate certain graves, you could get the flooding. So that's that's a thing. Not a thing there, but definitely a thing in some places.
So no weapons were found within that site. Because that's the same thing that happened in New York when they found the gravesite of African slaves.
Right.
And,
Genocide. Because of
This
died of a disease, you mean?
No,
the African burial ground in New York is definitely a different story. This is just your classic Great Britain ancestors.
It's amazing. It's just an amazing story.
Yeah, that is an amazing story. Well, look, thank you all.
Thank you.
You have